welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, I have suffered for you. We're going back to Aliens Colonial Marines as I have decided to play it for the first time. But it's a year of first times when it comes to the Alien franchise because I watched Alien for the first time this year over on Retro Rewind, and it's one of my favorite movies we've seen thus far. The story was shockingly good, full of twists and turns that I really didn't anticipate when I first sat down to watch it, but of course the world and the universe are really what pulled me in the most. Fully practical, but also clearly inspired so much of what I love in sci-fi culture nowadays. Something that Ridley Scott has been responsible for across both this movie and now Blade Runner. So I owe this man basically everything. So the question may be, Maddie, okay, you love this franchise, you're a little late to the party. Why? There are so many games attached to Alien and Aliens versus Predator. You got one right behind you. What's going on? Why? Well, you're not the only one asking that. Dumb over on our Patreon asked a not dumb question. And Maddie, one question, why? Thanks. And love how you're straight to the point there. So we thought that it made the most sense to synchronize this moment in pop culture where we have Alien Romulus coming out with Aliens Colonial Marines, because I just refuse to do a survival horror game in August. Like, I want to put that out in October during Spooky Month. We always do a bunch of survival horror games in October, and it's going to be no different this year. It's my favorite time to sit down and play them. We already got Silent Hill 3 in the can. We're going to do Alien Isolation. I'm really excited about a lot of things coming up for October. So that's when you'll see Alien Isolation. But for now, I wanted to settle into the worst of the worst, effectively, because I have played games like Aliens Fireteam Elite. You know, not too great, but not too bad either. Good co-op fun. So how bad could Aliens Colonial Marines really be? Well, I went through the game for the first time, all the way from start to finish with a buddy, and I found out. You know, we wanted to play a co-op game, and we kind of settled on this as well because we were looking at everything else, and it feels like every co-op game nowadays is a survival game. Like, can we switch it up a little bit, please? Like, I don't want to build a house with my friends in every co-op game. Like, sometimes this is a little bit more enjoyable. It's like, at least I'm shooting things with my friend. Anyway, I wisely avoided this game when it released in February of 2013. I was looking at games like BioShock Infinite. I was looking at GTA 5. I had no interest whatsoever in this series because I had never seen the movies anyway. So I saw the mess online, sure, but I never really dove deeper in that. More than anything though, what called me to this was Randy Pitchford's opening line at the first ever gameplay showing to press for Aliens Colonial Marines. A lot of what happens with this game behind the scenes is honestly too perfect, from the actual final product and things wrong with it to things said before it came out. So listen to this opening line where he talks about how, yes, holy crap, I can't believe they're letting them do it, an Aliens game.
Hi, my name is Randy Pitchford, and I'm the president of Gearbox Software, and I'm freaking out because we are making an Aliens game. Somehow, 20th Century Fox decided to trust our publisher Sega and our studio Gearbox Software to make Aliens Colonial Marines, to make a true sequel to the film in video game form.
It's so funny because in hindsight, it's like, yes, somehow they let you all make an Alien game, and you see what happens. Somehow they let this happen, somehow. So after witnessing that lack of self-awareness and willingness to lie to thousands of people's faces, including the investor of the product, I just had to see what happened here myself. Gearbox's Randy Pitchford famously sold this oftentimes as real gameplay, but in the final product you had massive visual downgrades, busted AI, glitches galore, it was woefully short, and that was throughout 6 to 7 years of game development time, which by the way, was extraordinarily long back then. Nowadays, this is what we hear for like every game being in development, like 6, 7 years, like game development was getting tougher and longer, but back then, things were happening at like a reasonable clip, like 3 years, and you could get a pretty good game. So yeah, doubling that, pretty insane at the time. However, this game that we actually played was stitched together in under a year due to multiple restarts on the product and then being forced out the door because otherwise the contract would have been void. So yeah, the whole 9 yards is here. And perhaps more interesting is that on paper, this was a fun idea. I mean, you have Gearbox, the Borderlands developers that were on a high. They just dropped the best ever Borderlands game in Borderlands 2. And I mean, what could go wrong here? Well, a lot. You had Duke Nukem Forever also coming out soon. So yeah, this was a really bad time for Gearbox, but a lot of this blame was also shared with Timegate Studios. So now you had this problem of Sega, Timegate, and Gearbox all having a lot of say in the project and not a lot being done. It's the perfect definition of too many hands in the cookie jar. And it's a game that should be studied and you should be aware of just for the health of the games industry. And it is one that is mentioned in game development classes, like at college, of like what not to do, because this is exactly what can happen. This is what can go wrong. So we begin things with the story here. The problems are already starting to appear. You know, the subtitles are overlapping. Okay, great. But pretty much what's happening here is 17 weeks after the events of Aliens, you and a team of Colonial Marines must investigate the USS Sulaco. Your crew consists of Winter, O'Neill, and Clareson. When your rescue goes south, my first glitch actually occurred here, as a fellow Colonial Marine thought the best response to a facehugger was to pull out a grenade and blow himself up in a tunnel and effectively screw all of us over. You know, like, I guess very selfish, right? Like, you know, he's gonna go down, so he may as well take all of us with him. At least this is what I think happened, because you'll see here that my co-op partner got the closer view and I didn't really get to see the actual cutscene itself. Anyway, much of this game is spent battling back the Weyland-Yutani. Probably a good time here to mention that the original desire for this game was to make it feel like a Call of Duty campaign, hence why there's more human shooting than alien shooting throughout most of the story. And at one point, Clareson is attacked by a facehugger, setting up the most obvious "we're going to try to imitate Alien" moment ever. Like, obviously, if you've seen the movie, and I say this as someone who just saw it this year, yeah, like, she's dead. She's dead as a doornail. We all know it. And a lot of the game in the early parts hinges on this relationship, and even after the fact is the reason, the catalyst for a lot of behavior between certain party members. It's really strange. Like, it's as if they were assuming people like me before April were stepping into this game going like, I know nothing about Alien or Aliens. Let's see how this one does for me. And oh wow, a facehugger that turns into a chest burster. No way, didn't see that happen before. Like, they were going for like pre-2024 Maddie, effectively. Honestly, this would be fine though, but because it hangs on for so long, it really drags down the product a lot. Part of the reason this doesn't really land is because O'Neill is attempting to have this very convincing reaction to what's going on with Clareson, because it's indicated beforehand that he's in love with her to some degree, but it's also first presented to you as like just a fling. And so why care now? I mean, don't get me wrong, like Travis Willingham actually put a lot of effort into this role. Like, out of everyone in the game, like, he was going hard the whole way through. Like, he sounded the part. It's just the way it's written wasn't phenomenal. Michael Biehn is actually back for this game, which I thought was kind of cool, since a decision involving his character in a separate movie proved to be unpopular, and in turn, this game actually brings him back into the fold. Unfortunately, he actually doesn't sound like he wants to be here at all based on his voice work, and he actually mentioned in a separate interview that he thought this project lacked passion, so I think that's kind of shining through here. Perhaps most telling, though, after I wrapped up this story, is actually the credits scene. When I was watching the credits roll, aghast at what I had just played, I was seeing a lot of thank you letters from the developers. In particular, many of those thank you letters were going out to their family, just saying like, thank you for bearing with the long nights in office. This game is the perfect representation that crunch culture doesn't really fix anything at all, and that bad management is, as it is still to this day, typically responsible for a lot of the crazy stuff happening in our games industry as layoffs continue to run rampant. So just a reminder here that this was super prevalent even back then in 2013. Now let's move on to the gameplay a little bit here, because there's a lot to unpack here. That's where a lot of my frustration really sat in, because like, I don't like a bad story, but I can kind of deal with it, especially in these older games, if the gameplay is kind of charming. Satello74 asked a really great question of, at what point did you and your co-op partner want to quit playing and do literally anything else? And the honest answer is, it took a little longer than I actually expected at first. Let me get into that. You see, while clearly visually downgraded, the film grain and interior clutter do a lot to make the game's visuals palatable, at least on PC. You know, scans of the inside of people infected by facehuggers decorate the wall. There's terminals. It looks decent. There's even a couple of pretty sweet views along the way where the rain is falling, the clouds are flickering different colors, and hell, there were even times I thought the lighting and color grading for environments was genuinely solid. Minus the fire and explosions, those are immediately very bad. But hey, if you told me like, this is our beta, or this is like our late alpha, and we're gonna polish this up for the final release for about a year or so, I wouldn't feel too awful about everything here. I mean, this game clearly needed more time than that, but I wouldn't feel horrible about it because there are parts that I don't think genuinely look bad. But given I played this game in a bubble and then did my research on the whiplash others explored after the fact, I feel that increased my enjoyment of things like the visuals, since ignorance is bliss, and that's obvious in this case. It was really what surrounded these visuals that gnawed at me over time. You see, the game does a really good job initially masking its limited mechanics. Like, when you fire it up and you start playing, mission 1, as they introduce these mechanics, you go, okay, like, hey, hold on, this could be kind of cool. The motion tracker is a perfect opening example, as it suggests that stealth gameplay or getting the jump on aliens might be a possibility. However, it only serves as a way to bring up your HUD to guide you to your next quest objective. Sure, it does detect enemies when they're around you, but they're already throwing themselves at you constantly, so it's never really ever necessary. There's also the ability to weld doors. It's introduced as a tutorial like, hey, press this button when you need to weld a door. It suggested to me there might be a time where we get completely overwhelmed and we have to quickly weld the door to get away because we can't fight back against all these aliens. But it's nothing more than something that typically triggers a cutscene or a checkpoint in order to move us into the next stage of the quest we're on. So yeah, I think that these mechanics could have been used way better, but also the time to kill for aliens in particular is outright insane. For example, they'll run at you, absorb every shot no matter what weapon you're using, grab you, deal a ridiculous amount of damage compared to what you can deal, and then they might actually die. Now, this could be somewhat okay if at least melee was somewhat useful, but it's not. Then you'll fight the giant alien at the end of chapter 5, and it's a highlight of just how piss poor things can get here. You have this insane health count, tons of aliens are spawning around you. I mean, tons of them all over the place. You have NPCs that are trying to help you out, but the AI is broken, so it doesn't really work out at all. This giant alien will one-hit you. The power loader does next to nothing to fight back, and basically the way you do win is by cheesing to win, which is never fun. Or a giant alien in the finale. It has no real weak points and just continues to run at you over and over, barreling you into corners. It's way quicker than you, and at the same time, you're getting chased by smaller aliens. It's very clearly an untested part of the game that they just threw in to switch up the type of encounter for the end of the game, since by that point, you need to up the ante somehow. When you combine this sort of encounter design with monster closets, you have yourself an extremely grating time. Now, for those who don't know what a monster closet is, think of like your old Call of Duty campaigns where you're here on this part of the level and the enemies are here, and they'll just keep spawning and you'll keep shooting them and taking them out. You're like, man, where is this gonna end? Well, it's never gonna end until you move your character physically to a point in the level, you take out whatever enemies remain, and then they'll stop spawning. This game is loaded with monster closet encounters. When you combine that with egregious mini-boss and boss-like encounters, it's terribly frustrating at times. Even though it's not a difficult game, all your deaths are cheap because the Wayland Yutani, the second you like poke out of cover, will be like looking sideways but still shooting you and taking out all of your health. And plus, you barely get any resources, so you just get wiped out both with your gun and your health bar ridiculously quickly. Obviously, it's not a fun game because many of the reasons speak for itself, but one of them that I wasn't anticipating is just awful balancing, completely untested, and clearly rushed out the door. Now, the finale actually wraps things up arguably on a perfect note. You're fighting the queen alien, and she's just gonna cluelessly wander about as you activate these terminals. The final button you push will hit it off the edge, and the final cutscene will then start as Cruz flies it off the station himself in this grand sacrifice. But I'm telling you, this is the worst all-time boss fight I've ever experienced. Like, just running around and watching this thing cluelessly stomp about, just having no idea what's going on. Just like, hey, I'm just gonna hang out here. I'm gonna wait, and you knock me off the station when you're good, brother, all right? Sounds good? Good. And that's literally what happened. I was just running around, clicking buttons. I died to a small alien at one point, and my friend revived me through a wall. I was like, this is so bad, and obviously, predictably, anticlimactic. I wasn't expecting much at all, but I mean, it just really lived up to my personal anticipation of something being an all-time low for gaming. So obviously you've probably heard a million people by this point in time on the internet complain about Aliens, Colonial Marines. Hi, sorry, I know I'm really late to the party here, but what can you do to ameliorate this? Like, what could this game have done with what's existing within it, with some extra time and fine tuning? What could have made this better? I think weapon upgrades, moving the needle, and playing a little bit differently would have done wonders for this game, because especially it's disappointing here knowing that Gearbox was involved. You have the Borderlands developers, who are known for reinventing the first-person shooter genre, introducing the looter shooter as a thing that's extremely prevalent to this day, and they were at a high point. Not only that, but this game includes legendary weapons like Hicks's shotgun, and there's about, I think, 6 legendaries that you'll find throughout the entire game. I popped the achievement for it during the finale, and I was like, there's that few, and none of them play differently. Most of them don't even have a separate skin at the bare minimum. They're just there under a different name. When you look at that versus what you get in any Borderlands game, and I understand that we're working within the limits of the Aliens license, but all you get really is a shotgun, a 3-burst weapon, and a fully auto weapon, and at one point during the finale, you get blessed with a flamethrower, an extremely limited one, might I add. By limited, I mean like, I got it for one small stretch of that level, and I was out of fuel by like halfway through that small stretch. Like, again, no balancing was done here to say like, oh, this is a new weapon, this is a different feel. Maybe we should just give them a lot of ammo here so they can at least use it. Even if they get out of the cave with it, you can drop it whenever you want, but like, the game just at times doesn't want you to have fun. So there's this lacking variety of weapons. They introduce legendaries that calls attention to it in a really bad way, where it's like, this doesn't feel different from what I was using before. And that's such a tremendous miss in a first-person shooter game, especially one from Gearbox, who's responsible for some of the greatest feeling weapons in first-person shooting. Because to me, an FPS lives and dies on how much it can vary itself up along the way. Or you're Doom and you just have relentlessly fun gameplay for like 20 hours. But there's no real enemy variation here. Like, you have the alien, the queen alien, the giant alien, Weyland-Yutani grunts, Weyland-Yutani heavy, and that's really it. In Mission 5, the game actually strips you of your guns and equipment, forcing you to feel vulnerable. It also warns you that if you're moving near an alien, it'll tip it off, and maybe staying still will help it. But my buddy and I just kind of coasted through this part without any concerns because the AI was so broken it didn't really matter anyway. I just wish that there was a little bit more here, like squad coordination, working together. Like, I think of Gears doing it in a right way, where oftentimes Gears would just build one big level and then they just have a path up the middle that was split into 2. And so pretty much what would happen is, instead of creating deliberate mechanics per level, it would just almost be like providing cover fire for your co-op partner. Like, you'd be on the top level, you take out a small amount of enemies to help give them cover down low, and then shoot enemies that were more exposed to you than them on that lower part of the level. Like, I think that's how it can be done in a way that's a lot more practical than making whole-on mechanics and thinking so big that you extend the timeline of development, because a lot of it does come down to like enemy placement, mob encounters, as well as level design, which is still a task, but at least a little bit more manageable. But the cherry on top truly is what my co-op partner put me on to, and RK128 actually mentioned it in his write-in on patreon.com/retrorevive, where he says, "Blessed day, Mr. Retro! Did you know that the AI was so broken that PC users fixed it super easily? It was broken code in the files that resulted in horrid AI, showing how unfinished this was. So let me lay out the text for you. pcanGame.pcanSeekAct_attach pawn to tether. This one letter was actually catastrophic because someone went in as a modder, looked at the code, found that typo. The word was supposed to be tether, and that would dramatically improve the Xenomorph AI because it would actually anchor the player in the player space. And so when I was playing it, like, a lot of times the aliens would just kind of look at you funny or stand still, sometimes even T-posing. Like, all it took was one letter, which is such a clumsy mistake and is a perfect representation of taking a look at a lot of projects in game development and showing just what a little extra time can do. When you hear about developers taking extra time to polish, it's to look over little things like these, just going through the lines of code, not like it's an easy task. Most things about game development are very difficult, but just fine-tooth comb, trying to just smush out those errors. A lot of game development and when the game itself releases can be very unpredictable. So eliminating things like this, so at least the line of code is there, functioning as intended rather than it being completely disabled because of one typo, is just like the perfect cap to this retrospective of how avoidable some of the problems were. A little more testing here to fix the AI, a little bit more encounter balancing to at least make it tolerable. Maybe I get to hold on to that flamethrower in the finale a little bit longer now, and that works out in my advantage because I have a little bit more fun. Little variances in encounters, a little bit of a variance in the weapons I have, and you're looking at a game that's an easy 2 to 4 out of 10 to something that could have, I think, frankly, been a 7 out of 10. Something that I'm pretty sure Randy himself said it was easily a 7 out of 10, and I wish, truly, but unfortunately, not the case. So yeah, my first time going through Aliens Colonial Marines was certainly a journey. Shout out to my buddy Soul, who went through this entire playthrough with me. I needed someone to suffer with me. I would not have been able to do this by myself. It made it a lot more enjoyable. But the question may be like, Maddie, look, like, it doesn't look that bad. Could I enjoy it just with a buddy? I don't even think it's like a bad game Friday event. Like, you would want to pick this one up. Like, it's just, yeah, it just feels like it's littered with missed opportunity. And even though it's dirt cheap, and rightfully so, like, there's a reason we didn't do a complete box experience for this. Like, I'm not buying a game to bring it into the collection, taint everything around it, and then immediately like trade it in or donate it to a thrift store, and then like it's there for someone else to pick it. It's like, let's just leave it in the past, right? This is one piece of media that I'm okay just leaving over there, all right? So with that, ladies and gentlemen, that's my first ever experience with Aliens Colonial Marines. A journey, to say the least. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the game down below. Let me know what you're thinking. And with that, I'll catch you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.